Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gen AI Talkin' 10, brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. I'm Brad, and he is Satish. And Satish, I noticed you're wearing a shirt like me. I have my Stress Less, Automate More shirt, and you have your Next Gen shirt on. Very nice. That'll help us get into the mode today.
Yeah, I'm proud of wearing this shirt. All right.
So, Satish, we know that large language models are trained on an incredible amount of data. What kind of data specifically are they trained on?
It really, depends, because if you look at some of the large language models, right, there are various kinds of models, and the extensive data sets that you're referring to could cover a wide range of topics, languages, and formats. If you look at some of the traditional models like ChatGPT, or GPT, right? These were trained on the entire internet, right? That took years to do. But then there are some domain-specific models which will be trained on, specific data sets. For example, the Bloomberg models that you probably heard of are domain-specific, which is financial services specific. And hence the data sets that they're used is, specific to financial services. Now, if you look at some of these models, right, take ChatGPT, the first version of ChatGPT took about 3 to 4 years to train. So you can see how extensive this process is in training a model, but the data that's used could vary based on what it is that you're trying to build end of the day. The ChatGPT model is a general purpose model, right? But a Bloomberg model, for example, or some other model that caters to healthcare, for example, are specific or custom models that use different data set.
Okay.
Well, one thing I'll add, Brad, right? When you're looking at the foundational layer of data, right, when it comes to training models, you also look at things like data quality and diversity, right? What kind of data are you giving the model, and how diverse is it? Because if the data is not diverse, your output, your results won't be as diverse as you expect, right? It won't represent the world of possibilities, right? There's also pre-processing that's done on that data, so that standardized in terms of formats. You remove noise from that data so that it does not really reduce the quality of the model itself. There's also interesting topic that keeps coming up with customers, and we have experienced this ourselves, is this idea of labeling the data. Because in order to train, I know we didn't get into that, but it's an important concept when it comes to data foundations for large language models. Data needs to be labeled. And why would, you'd say, why do you need to label data? Well, because in order to train the model, you need to tell the model what that data is.
Yeah.
Right?
And we know that data labeling is often the biggest bottleneck
Yes.
in preparing to train a model. In fact, I got the chance to interview the CEO of a startup company in Silicon Valley called Snorkel AI. And they've developed an AI that labels data. So it's an automated labeling, which reduces that prep time quite a bit. So it's kind of an interesting way to go at that. So Satish, let me ask you, who is responsible for keeping these models up to date and retraining them? And that's an incredible amount of data that's used to build them. But over time, who keeps those models refreshed?
And like most things that we talk about, the answer is it depends, right? The reason I say that again is take open models that are available publicly, right? Now, those, not open source, but people that have created models, maybe they're open source, maybe they're not, but those models, there's no set kind of structure to update that model because there's no real price you're paying for it. There's no commitment around updating that model, right? So that's a little bit out there, not very reliable, right? But look at commercial models, right? Like Azure OpenAI. Now, the company that built it, in this case, Microsoft, along with OpenAI, are responsible to keep that model up to date, especially for companies that pay for the use of the model. They're expecting that that model is up to date, and you'll see these releases of later and later versions of models, and that those releases come on a pretty regular basis. Now, there's a third category we'll talk about, which is open source model, right? Where there are companies, there are groups of people, communities that have created these models. Now, those same communities will keep the model up to date. They'll do their best. It's almost on a best effort basis. And the last category is private models, where somebody might take a model or build their own model, and then they're responsible now to keep it updated, right? We'll also see this trend, Brad, you'll remember, right? When we talk to customers, they'll say, well, I've brought in-house an open source model, and I have updated it, right? Now, once you update the model, once you train the model for your own use, then it becomes yours, right? So you have to be careful. We would like to remind customers that should they choose to update a model, right? Instead of using other techniques like tuning and vector databases, which I know we'll talk about at some point, if they train the model, then it's become theirs, right? They need to keep it updated. Otherwise, they have to go back to the model they started with or the latest version of that model. So somebody else is keeping it updated.
Okay. Well, you started to talk about vector databases, and that's exactly where my brain was going next. And I want to talk about local or proprietary data. So where does that fit in to this data foundation that we're talking about for large language models?
Yeah, so let's consider a very commonly used model like GPT or Azure OpenAI, right? Mm-hmm. The problem with that model is it's a very broad, it caters to a very broad set of data and a very broad market. It can be used by everybody. It's trained on the internet, right? Mm-hmm. More available data. So it's a kind of master of none. It's really all this world encompassing data, right? The problem with using a model like that, let's say I'm an insurance company, I'm a bank. I want to use GPT 4 or what have you, right? Or Azure OpenAI, some version of Azure OpenAI. The problem is the model is too generic to make it very useful for your particular use cases. Let's say the use case is something like credit agreement processing, right? Mm-hmm. If there are policies that the bank has, if there are specific agreements they have with their clients, none of that knowledge exists in that LLM, right? That model that was brought in. And so in order to address that, people have the option to take what's local, right? The local information, the local policy, the local contracts they have, and keep that private, but still bring that into the environment that they're using the Gen AI platform as a vector, and store that information in what is called a vector database. Vector database is a specialized form of database, basically made up of vectors. Vectors are nothing but numbers representing words. And so, these vector databases now will hold local contextual data. In this case, for the bank that's trying to process credit agreements, they want to use their data along with the LLM or the model. And so they use the vector database to store their data. It's private to them. And then they're using it in conjunction with the LLM or the model to get responses so that they can use the generated content, right? And it'll be very relevant to them versus, being generic, right?
Say,
That's how we see customers using it. We use we hear the term RAG. We hear
Yep.
things like people that are using cognitive search. These are all terms associated with using local contextual data for the company or the organization, along with the model or the LLM to
Excellent.
make that content useful.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for all your thoughts today. And everyone, we hope you join us next time on Gen AI Talk in 10.